So hello everyone, welcome back to our annual Python programming course for beginners. I hope you enjoyed the previous lecture where we learned about tuple, sets, and dictionaries. Those are some Python's most important collection data types. If you have not watched those videos, you can go back again in the playlist and you can watch those videos again if you have not understand it well or if you have not learned it, you can go back and watch it again. So now what are we going to learn today? In today's lecture, we are going to learn another very important topic called functions in Python. So now what are functions? So functions are one of the most powerful features of programming. Almost every Python program, whether it is a small or it is large, we use functions. Now, why we use this? Because it helps us write code clean and organized, and functions are easy to use. Now imagine you have to perform a same task many times in your program. So instead of writing the same code again and again, you can simply create a function once and call it whenever you need it. This saves times, reduces mistakes, and makes your program much easier to understand. So, what are we gonna cover in this lecture? We will learn about what are the functions, how we create them, what are some parameters of functions, the return statement. We will also see some different type of functions, variable scope, recursive functions, lambda functions, and then we will solve life example, and finally we will test our understanding with a little quiz which we are doing from the past two three lectures. Now, so I am assuming you that by the end of this lecture, you will be able to create your own functions and write much professional Python program. So let's get started. So let's so moving to our next slide where we will see a small recap of our previous lecture. So moving on to our next slide. Before we move on to this topic, let's take a quick look at what we learned in our previous slide. What we learned in our previous lectures. So revising previous concepts helps us build a strong foundation and makes it easier to understand new topics. So in lecture 10, we studied about Python's collection. You can see on the PPT, you can read the PPT. That what we studied in the lecture 10, we studied Python's collection data types, which are used to store multiple values in a single variable. So the first collection type we learned was tuples. A tuple is ordered, immutable collection of items. Ordered means elements keep their position, and immutable means once a tuple is created, you cannot change them. Tuples are written using parentheses. These are parentheses in the round brackets. These are parentheses. Next, we learn about sets. A set is an unordered collection that stores only unique values. If duplicate values are added, Python automatically removes them. Sets are created using curly braces like this. After that, we studied dictionaries. So a dictionary stores a data as a key value pairs. Every key is unique and is used to access its corresponding value. Dictionaries are also created using curly braces, but each item is written in key value format, like this: key, column, then value. Then we also discussed the four main collection data types available in Python. They list tuple sets and dictionaries. Each one has its own purpose, and choosing the right collection makes our program more efficient. After that, we learn about some collection methods. Every collection provides built-in methods that help us perform different operations. For examples, tuples have methods like count and index. Sets provide methods like add and remove. The dictionaries include methods like keys, values, and items. Then finally, we learn different way of accessing element. In tuples, we access element using their index. In dictionary, we use key to access values. Since sets are unordered, they do not support indexing, and we usually access their elements by looping through them. So that was a very quick recap of our previous lecture. Now that we have understood Python collection, let's move on our today's exciting topic and learn about functions in Python, which help us with to write clearer, reusable, and more organized code. So moving on to our next slide. The most important concept in Python programming called functions. So function is a simply reusable block of code. What is function? Reusable block of code. So remember this word reusable block of code. Sorry. It performs a specific task whenever it is called. Instead of writing the same code again and again, we can write it once inside a function and use it multiple times. This makes our program shorter, cleaner, and easier to manage. Now look at the first topic, the definition of functions. A function is simply a reusable block of code, as I told you. So now let's look at the definition. Function is a group of statements that work together to perform a particular task. Think of it as a small machine. When you press the button, the machine performs its job. Similarly, a function does nothing until we call it. For example, imagine you have written some code to calculate the area of a rectangle. If you need the same calculation many times, instead of copying those lines repeatedly, you can create a function once and simply call it whenever required. Here, you can also see a simple example. It is this example. Def is used to create a function. This is a keyword in Python, reserved keyword, I already told you. And my function is the name of the function. You can name your function anything. The parentheses are used to define functions, and later we call the function by writing its name followed by parentheses. Don't worry if this looks new. In the next slides, we will learn how to create functions step by step. And here, if the pass statement is given, and in the last, the function is called. There is, it's like a basic syntax of function. Now, why we use functions? Why functions are used? So there are few points. Let's see these points. The first reason is to avoid repetition of code. If the same code is needed multiple times, writing it once inside a function saves both time and effort. The second reason is better readability. When our program is divided into smaller functions, anyone reading the code can understand it much more easily. Third reason is modularity. Large programs become easier to build because we divide them into smaller parts and each function performs only one specific task. Functions also make program easier to test and debug. If something goes wrong, we only check the functions where the problem exists. Finally, functions promote code readability and code reusability. Once a function is written, we can use it in many times in the same program or even in different program. Now, let's see the third point, benefits of functions. So because of these advantages, functions provide many benefits. They improve code reusability. I have already told you, since the same functions can be called again and again. They make program readable because the code is divided into meaningful sections. They make maintenance easier. If we want to change the logic, we only modify the function instead of updating the same code in many places. Functions also reduce the total length of our code and make it more organized. When multiple developers work on the same project, functions help different team members work on separate parts of the program without creating confusion. Now, let's look at some real life examples where functions are commonly used. Suppose you are building a calculator application. A function can calculate the area or volume whenever it is needed. In an email application, one function can handle sending emails. In a banking application, a function can process payments. In websites and mobile apps, functions are used for user login, password verification, and many other tasks. Similarly, report generation in schools, college, and companies is also performed using different functions. So functions are everywhere in programming. They help us write clearer, smarter, and more efficient code. Now that we understand what functions are and why they are important, let's move to the next topic and learn how to create our functions in Python. Hope this slide is clear to you, although this is very basic, but it's very important. So, and don't worry if you have not understand well, because in the upcoming slides, I assure you that you will understand very well. So moving on to our next slide, and we are going to learn how to create functions in Python. Now that we understand what functions are and why they are useful, now let's learn how to create them in Python. So creating a function is very simple. Python provides a special keyword called def. So this keyword def keyword is a reserved keyword in Python, and the full form of def is define. So we use this keyword whenever we want to create a new function. Now let's see about the def keyword. The def keyword tells Python that we are defining a function. Every function in Python starts with this keyword. Here you can see a simple example. Def, the function is created, my function, and pass. In the example, my function is the name of the function. The parenthesis comes after the function name. Right now they are empty because we are not passing any information to the function. Later in this lecture we will learn how to pass data using parameters. After the parenthesis we write a colon. This tells Python that function body is about to begin. You can see colon here. Inside the function we have written pass. The pass statement is simply a placeholder. It means the function exists, but we have not written any code in it yet. It is useful when we want to create the function first and add the actual code later. Now let's understand the general syntax of a function. See here. Now see how the syntax looks like. Take a minute and try to understand this or see this. Now let's understand each part. First we have write the def keyword. Next comes the function name. You can choose any meaningful name, such as if you want to calculate area, you can choose the name as calculate area. If you want to print message for someone, you can print message. So you can print any name, any meaningful name for the function. Then we write parenthesis in the function that needs some input. We write parameters inside the parenthesis. If no input is required, we simply leave the parenthesis empty. After the parenthesis, we write a column. Finally, we write the function body, which contains the statement that should execute when the function is called. Notice that the code inside the function is indented. In Python, indentation is compulsory. Without proper indentation, Python will give an error. So what I said, in Python indentation is compulsory because without proper indentation, Python will give error. I am telling you from starting that indentation is important in Python because without indentation, you will get an error. So now let's see how we call a function. So creating a function cannot automatically execute it. For executing the function, you must have to call the function. This is one of the most common mistakes beginners make. After creating the function, we must call it whenever we want it to run. Calling a function is very simple. You just write the function name followed by parentheses. For example, you can see my function like this. My function. When Python reaches this line, it goes to the function definition, executes all the statements inside it, and then returns to the next line of the program. Like you can see not full only this my function in the last. You can see here example is also given. Sorry. Huh. So remember the difference. Creating a function means writing its definition, while calling a function means executing it. Now let's understand this completed example here. Here, first see the code given here. Here we have created a function named greet. You can see a function named greet is created. Then inside the function there is only one statement. Whenever this function runs, it prints hello Python. But notice something important. Just writing the function is not enough. To execute it, we must call it. So here we write greet and called the function. Now Python enters the function, executes the print statement, and the output will be hello Python. Here is the output. You are not able to see it because of this camera. So the output will be simply hello Python. If we call the function again, if we write here greet again, then the output will be hello Python 2 times. So this is how we create and call functions in Python. In our upcoming slide, we will learn how to make functions even more useful by passing information to them using function parameters. Hope the creation of functions is clear to you that how we are going to create functions. So if it is not clear to you, you can go back and rewatch this slide. Now moving on to our next topic, that we know how to create and call a function. Let's make our function more useful by learning about function parameters. Sometimes we want the function to work with different values every time it is called. Instead of creating multiple functions, we can pass information to a function. This information is using parameters and arguments. Although these two terms sound similar, they have different meanings. Let's understand them one by one. Now you can see parameters here. First read this. Now parameters are the variables written inside the parentheses when we define a function. For example, you can see here an example def add a and b. So here a and b are parameters. So you can think of a parameter as empty boxes or placeholders. They don't have any value when the function is created. They simply wait for values to be provided. Later when the function is called, the function does not know what values a and b will contain until someone calls it. So remember, parameters are variables that receive values inside a function. Now let's understand about arguments. You can see here arguments. Arguments are the actual values that we pass to a function when calling the function. For example, you can see here add 10 and 20. Like here a and b is written. These are parameters, and when we are calling this function, this function we are calling it, and we call these functions like this, and we pass the value 10 and 20. So the values inside the function called is are the arguments. So 10 become the value of parameter A and 20 become the value of parameter B. This is the easiest way to remember the difference. Now, parameters are written in the function definitions, arguments are written in the function call. Now let's see how values are passed. When we write add 10, 20, you can see that when we write add and in parenthesis 10, 20, yes. Then it takes the first value 10 and store it inside parameter A. And after that, it takes value 20 and store it inside parameter B. The value are assigned in order. That means the first argument goes to the first parameter and the second argument goes to the second parameter and so on. So Python passes these values to the function. The function performs its task and then it finishes execution. So whenever you call a function, make sure you pass the value in the correct order. Now let's understand the example given here. So our first example is, you can see here a function uh, def grid and parameter is passed called name. So name is parameter because it is written inside the defining functions. Then we call the function using the print. The word Rahul becomes the argument. So Python stores Rahul inside the parameter name, and finally it will give the output hello Rahul. Now in the second code here, x and y are two parameters. The value 15, a statement is passed to return an addition of both, and two values are passed, 15 and 25. So the 15 is stored in x and 25 is stored in y. So the result is stored in the variable result, and finally output becomes 50. So the most important point to remember is this: parameters are placeholder written while creating a function, but arguments are the real values passed while calling a function. Once you understand this difference, working with functions becomes much easier. Now, hope this is clear to you, and if you are facing any problem, you can rewatch the lecture. Now, if in the next topic, we will learn about another important concept called the return statement, which allows a function to send a value back after completing its work. So moving on to our next slide. So now that we know how to create functions and pass parameter, let's learn about one of the most important concepts in Python functions called the return statement. A function can perform some work, but very often we also want it to send the result back. This is exactly what the return statement does. So the return statement sends the value from the function back to the place where the function was called. This return value can then be stored in a variable, printed on the screen, or used in another calculation. Let's understand each part given here in the slide. So firstly, let's understand what this return function is. Read these points. So the return keyword is used inside a function whenever we want the function to send back a result. And one important thing to remember this is that as soon as Python reaches the return statement, the function immediately stops executing. Any code written after the return statement inside the function will not run. Now let's look at the example given here. A small example. You can see here the function hello returns the text hello. You can see the result return value is stored inside the variable result. Finally, you can see here print result. So it prints the output hello. Now another important point is that if we don't write any return statement, Python automatically returns none by default. Let's see about returning values. A function can return almost any type of data. It can return an integer, a decimal number, a string, a list, a dictionary, or many other data types. Now look at the example given here. Here you can see the example. First read the example. Here the function receives 5 as input. It calculates 5 multiplied by 5, which gives the output 25. So instead of printing the answer inside the function, it returns 25. The returned value is stored in the variable x, and later we print it. So the output becomes 25. This is why return is so useful. The function gives the answer back, and we can use it anywhere in our program. Now, what's the difference between print statement and return? So, can see many beginners get confused between print and return, but they have completely different purposes. The print function simply displays information on the screen, while the return sends a value back to the program. The value can be stored inside a variable and later used in another calculation. Another important difference is that print does not stop the function but return immediately and the function's execution. So remember the simple rule. If you want to display something on the screen, use print. If you want the function to give back a value for the further use return. And the last one, print does not return a value, but return it returns a value. Now let's look at the both examples. The first example is of addition. Here the function adds 10 and 20. So instead of printing the answer directly, it returns the result 30. The returned value is stored inside the variable sum. Finally, using the print statement, it prints the output 30. Now look at the second example. Read the second example. Here the function creates the text hello Rahul. It returns the string. The returned value is stored inside the variable message. Finally, using the print statement, it displays output hello Rahul. These examples show that a function can return numbers, strings, and almost any data type. Now, what we have learned, the return statement is used to send the value back from a function. Once Python executes the return statement, the function immediately stops. The returned value can be stored in a variable printed later or used in another calculation. And finally, remember the difference. Print is used to display output on the screen and return is used to send the value back from a function or future use. In the next topic, we will continue exploring more powerful concept of Python function that will help you to write clearer, smarter, and more reusable programs. So moving on to our next slide. Thank you. So in the previous slide, we learned what functions are and how to create them, how to pass parameters, and how to return values. Now let's learn about the different types of functions available in Python. So Python provides different types of functions to make our program more powerful and flexible and easier to maintain it. In this slide, we will discuss three main types of functions: built-in function, user-defined function, and anonymous or lambda function. So the first type we are going to discuss is the built-in type function. So built-in type functions are functions that are already provided by Python. This means we do not have to create them ourselves. We can simply call them whenever we need them. Some common examples are, you can see here some common examples: print, len, type, input, max, min, sum, and many more. These functions help us perform common tasks very easily. Now look at the example given below. So you can see here name is equal to Python. Now two functions are there, len name and type name. The len function counts the number of characters in the string. Since the word Python contains 6 letters, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 letters, the output will be 6. And the type function tells the data type of the variable. Since name is a string, it prints class str as output. Now look at another example. Nums is equal to 159. And there we are using two functions again, max and sum. So the max functions return the largest number in the list, which is 9. So the output will be 9. And the sum functions add all the numbers together. So 1 plus 5 plus 9 will give 15. So these built-in functions save us time because they are already available in the Python. Now, the second type is user-defined function. As the name suggests, these functions are created by the programmer according to the program's requirement. We create them using def keyword. Whenever we have some code that needed to be used repeatedly, we can place it inside a user-defined function. This makes our programs cleaner and more reusable. Now, look at the program given below. You can see here test grid then name, print hello name, and then we can see two functions read. Here we create a function called read. It accepts one parameter called name. Whenever we call this function with a different name, it prints different greeting. So the first call prints Siddharth. Here we are calling Siddharth. So the output will be hello Siddharth. And in the second call, we are printing LPU student. So the output will be hello LPU student. Notice that we wrote the greeting code only once, but we used it multiple times. So this is the biggest advantage of user-defined function. Now, the third type is anonymous function, also known as Lambda function. So Lambda functions are very small functions and are generally written in only one line. You can read here. So instead of writing using def keyword, we use the lambda keyword here. They are usually used for sort operation where creating a full function is unnecessary. Now look at the first example. Add is equal to, you can see here, lambda x comma y, then column, then x plus 5. And then print statement is executed. So here the lambda function adds two number where we pass 5 and 7, which returns 12. And the output is 12. Now look at the other example. Here the map functions applies the lambda function to every element in the list. So what is the use of this map function? The map function is used to apply the lambda functions to every element given in the list. Now each number is multiplied by itself, so the output becomes 1, 4, 9 and 16. 1 is multiplied by 1, 2 is multiplied by 2, 3 is multiplied by 3 and 4 is multiplied by 4. So here you can see the square of the numbers are in the example squares of the number of fit squares of the number निकालना है. So lambda functions are most used with functions like map, filter and sorted. Don't worry if these functions look new, we will study them in detail in later lectures. For now, just remember that lambda functions are useful for writing short one-line operation. Now, what we learn in this slide, that Python has three common type of function, built-in function that are already available in Python and are ready to use. User-defined functions that are created by the programmer using the def keyword. The third one which we did is lambda functions, which are small one-line functions created using the lambda keyword. Now, each type has its own purpose. Use built-in functions for common tasks, user-defined functions for home logic, and lambda functions for short and simple operations. Now, in the next slide, we will continue more advanced concepts related to functions in Python. So, moving on to our next. Now, we have learned about how to create function, pass parameters, return values, and the different type of function. Now, let's understand another very important concept called variable scope. So, before starting, I want to tell you that I closed my webcam because this code was unable to seen by you because of my camera. So I have to off my camera. Now let's understand variable scope. It tells us where a variable can be accessed in a program. In Python, there are mainly two types of variable scope: local variables and global variable. Let's understand both of them one by one. So first see local variable. A local variable is a variable that is created inside a function. It exists only while that function is running. Once the function finishes executing, the local variable is destroyed automatically. This means we cannot use a local variable outside its function. Now let's look at this example below. Here we can see a function. Inside the function, we create a variable named x. You can see here. We have created a variable named x and assign the value 10 to it. Then we write print statement inside the function. It works perfectly because x belongs to that function. But outside the functions, if we again write print x, Python gives an error because you can see it gives an error that X is not accessible here because the variable exists only inside the function, not outside the functions. So it is a local variable. So always remember, local variable stay local to their functions. If you write, it means that if you write the local variable outside the function, it will give you error. Now, let's understand what are these global variables. So a global variable is declared outside all functions. Unlike local variables, global variables are available throughout the program. They can be accessed both inside and outside the function. Now let's see the example which is given here. Here the variable x is created before the functions. Since it is outside the function, it becomes a global variable. When the function runs print x, it will print output 10. After the function finishes, if we again write print x, so it will give output 10. It will not give you error like the previous one, the local variable. It will give you output 10 because global variables are available almost everywhere in the program. So the output becomes 10, 10. So the main difference between local and global variable is that the local variable will give output if called outside the function, while global variable will not give output, will not give error. Now, using the global keyword, sometimes you want to change the value of a global variable inside a function. For that, Python provides the global keyword. Now, look at this example for which I have off my webcam. You can see the example. Here, count is a global variable. This count is a global variable. Inside the function, we write global count. This tells Python that we want to use global variable instead of creating a new local variable. Then we increase its value one by one. You can see count is equal to count plus 1. Initially, count is equal to 0. After that, you can see here count is equal to 1. Finally, we have written print count. We call the variable here too. Now, without the global keyword, Python would think count is a new local variable and the program would produce an error if we try to modify it. Now, difference between local and global variable. Let's compare them quickly. A local variable is created inside a function and it can only access inside the function. It disappears when the function ends. While a global variable is created outside functions, it can be accessed throughout the program. It remains available until the program finishes. So choose the type of variable depending on where you want to use it. Now let's quickly see what we revised in this topic. So variable scope define where a variable can be accessed. There are two main types, local and global. Which local is that which exists only inside a function, global which are available throughout the program. If you want to modify a global variable inside a function, use the global keyword. So understanding variable scope helps you avoid errors and write cleaner code, more organized Python program. Now in the next slide, we will continue learning another important topic related to Python functions. Thank you. Moving on to our next slide. As parameter return values, and we also understand variable scopes. Now we are going to learn one of the most interesting concepts in Python called recursion. So what is a recursion? Recursion or recursive function, you can call anything. A recursive function is simply a function that calls itself to solve a problem. So instead of solving a large program all at once, recursion breaks into a smaller and a smaller version of the same problem until it's become easy to solve. Let's understand every section of this slide. So the first section is what is recursion. Recursion is a programming technique in which a function calls itself. Every time the function calls itself, it works on a smaller version of the original problem. So it keeps reducing the problem until it reaches the smallest possible case. Think of it climbing down a staircase. You don't jump from the top to bottom in one step. Instead, you go down one step at a time until you reach the ground. Similarly, recursion works in the similar way. Now, it solves a big problem by breaking it into many smaller problems. So you can see the diagram that shows one large problem being divided into smaller and smaller part until the smallest program is read. Here you can see first it is a big program, so it is divided into three other small programs. Then these three programs are divided into shortest programs. So this is the how this is how the recursion works. Now let's learn about the base case. The base case is the most important part of recursion. It tells the function when to stop calling the function, when to stop calling the function, stop calling itself forever. This is called infinite recursion, and eventually the program will crash with an error. So once the function reaches the base case, recursion stops when the answer starts returning back. So always remember, every recursive function must have a base case. Without it, recursion never ends. So you can think that base case is like exit door of recursion. Now let's understand the recursive call. So a recursive call is simply the point where the function calls itself again. Each time it calls itself, the input becomes a little smaller or simpler. For example, if we want to calculate something for 5, the function may call itself for 4, then 3, then 2, then 1, and finally it reaches to its base case. Now, after reaching the base case, Python starts returning the answers one by one until the original function call is completed. So the flowchart look like this. You can see here, first we can function call, recursive call, then recursive call to base case, then base case to return. This process may look confusing at first, but once you practice a few examples, it becomes much easier. Now let's see a simple example of factorial. The factorial of a number is calculated like this. If factorial of 5 is given, so if you want to calculate factorial of 5, you can calculate like you have to multiply 5 into 4 into 3 into 2 into 1. So the answer is 120. So this is the factorial. Now look at the program given here. First look at the program and try to understand it. So let's understand it step by step. First, the function check whether n is equal to 0 or not. Here, a function factorial is defined inside that n parameter is given, then it is checking that n is equal to 0 or not. If it is 0, the function returns 1. This is the base case. If it is 0, the function will return 1. This is the base case. Otherwise, the function will return n into factorial n minus 1. This means the function call itself again with a smaller number. Now suppose we call factorial 5. Now Python performed this step. Here it is 5 into factorial of 5 minus 1, which is 4. Then it becomes 4 into factorial of 3. Then it becomes 3 into factorial of 2. Then 2 into factorial of 1. Then 1 into factorial of 0. And at last it is 0. So returns 1 became its best case. Now Python starts returning the answer. 1 times 1 equal 1, 2 times 1 equal 2, 3 times 1 equal 6. Similarly, the output will be 120. So the final output will be 120. This is exactly how recursion works. So a recursive function is a function that calls itself. It solves large problems by breaking them into smaller ones. Every recursive function must have a base case to stop recursion. Without a base case, the program will enter infinite recursion and produces an error. Recursion is commonly used in problems like factorial, Fibonacci series, tower of Hanel, tree traversal, and many advanced algorithms. Now, don't worry if recursion feels like a little difficult today. It's one of the topics that becomes easier with practice. Now, in the next slide, we will continue learning another useful concepts in Python functions. Thank you. Moving on to our next slide. So, in the previous slide, we got a brief introduction to Lambda function while learning the type of function. Now, let's understand Lambda function in detail. Lambda function is a small anonymous function in Python. The word anonymous, wait a minute. The word anonymous simply means without a name. Unlike normal functions, lambda functions are written in a single line and they are mainly used for short, simple tasks. Now let's understand the syntax of lambda function. So the syntax is, you can see here, first the lambda keyword, then you have to write arguments, then you have to write expression. So the first part is the lambda keyword, which tells Python that we are creating a lambda function. The second part contains the argument while we are which are the input values. And the last part is the expression. The lambda function can contain only one expression. Python automatically evaluates this expression and returns the result. So unlike normal function, we do not write the return keyword. The result is returned automatically. So remember the simple rule. Lambda function is short, simple, and written in just one line. Now let's understand the lambda keyword. So the lambda keyword is used to create anonymous functions. These functions do not have a function name like normal function creating using def. Another important point is that lambda function can take any number of arguments, but they can contain only one expression. That single expression is automatically evaluated and its result is returned. Because of this, lambda functions are mainly used for a small calculation or quick operation. So you don't need to write the def, return, or even give the function a proper name unless you want to store it in a variable. Now let's understand some simple examples. So first example is of adding two numbers. This one is the example for adding two numbers. Now first you read the code. Now take a look at the code. Now here the lambda function receives two numbers, 5 and 3. It adds them together. When we pass 5 and 3, the answer becomes 8 and the output is 8. Like you can clearly see here, uh, this is the argument and this is the expression. Arguments are x comma y, and in the expression we are adding both x and y. Now in the second example, we are going to do the square of number. See the code. Here the function receives one number, then it multiplies the number by itself. You can see the function receives only one number, and then it multiplies the number by itself. So multiplying the number by itself gives the square of the number. So we took 6 here, so the output will be 36. Now in the third example, we will check the number is even or odd. So this lambda function checks whether the example is even or odd. So the expression uses Python's condition expression. If the remainder after dividing by 2 is 0, it returns even, otherwise it returns odd. You can see condition statement is used here. So since 7 is not divisible by 2, the output is odd. So these examples show how useful lambda functions are for writing short piece of logic. Like if you have to write it by, if you have to write this code by different method, you have to write in some more lines. But using lambda functions, you are writing this in only few lines, one or two lines, not more than that. Now, when we use lambda functions, it is an important question. So when should we use lambda functions? Lambda functions are useful when we need a small functions for a short period of time. They are commonly used when a function needs to be passed as an argument to another function. They also help us write shorter and cleaner code. Some common situations include using them with functions like map, filter, reduce, sorted. They are also used in event handling, quick calculation, and other situations where writing a complete function would be unnecessary. However, if your function becomes long or complicated, it is usually better to use a normal functions created with def. So remember, use lambda function for simple tasks, not for large programs. Now, let's quickly revise what we learned in this slide. A lambda function is a small anonymous function created using lambda's keyword. It can accept multiple arguments but contains only one expression. The expression is automatically evaluated and returned. Lambda functions are perfect for short calculation and commonly used with functions like map, filter, and sorted. For large or complex tasks, it is better to use normal functions created with this keyword. Now, our all the topics are done in the next slide. Hope hope you have understand this lecture. And now on the next slide, we are going to practice some examples. So moving on to our next. Now that we have learned what are functions, how to create them, passing parameters, variable scope, recursion, and lambda functions. Now let's use our all knowledge that we use today to build a simple real-life program called a student result calculator. This example shows how function can solve practical problems in everyday life. Let's understand the program step by step. First, look at the function. This line, def result, and the parameter passed is marks. Here we can create a function named result. It accepts only one parameter, marks. This parameter will store the marks entered by the user. Now, in the next line, we are writing condition. You can see the condition here. So this means if the student marks are 50 or greater than 50, the function returns the word pass. Notice that we are using the return statement because we want to send the result back to the program. Now look at the next line, return fail. So if the condition is false, meaning the marks are less than 50, the function returns fail. So the function always returns one of two values, either pass or fail. Now let's see how the user enters the marks. Here, as you can see, the input functions ask the user to enter the marks, and the int function converts the entered value into an integer because marks are numerical values. And finally, we call the function print result, and the entered result are passed to the result function. Now the functions check the condition and returns either pass or fail. The print function then displays the returned result on the screen. Now let's quickly understand how it works. First, the user enter marks. So those marks are passed to the result function. The function checks whether the marks are greater than or equal to 50. If they are greater than 50, it returns pass, otherwise it returns fail. Finally, the return value is printed on the screen. Now, suppose the user enter 65. Since 65 is greater than 50, the condition becomes true, so the function returns pass. And imagine if the user entered 35, the function would return fail. This is how function help us make decision in program. Now let's look at the another example given here. So here we created a function called greet. It accepts one parameter named name. When we call greet Rahul, the function prints welcome Rahul. If we change the name to Siddharth or any other person name, the same function works without changing its code. This is the power of reusable program. Now let's look at another example. First read the code. Now this function calculates the square of a number, the parameter, and receives the value 5. The function returns the square of 5, it will multiply the number by itself and it will give 25. Notice that we used return instead of print function inside the function. This allows us to return the value anywhere else in the program is needed. Now What we learned from this slide is that function help us solve real-world problems by breaking into smaller tasks. The sprint result calculator showed how function can process user input and return useful result. The greeting example demonstrated code reusability, while the square function showed how return gives back values for further use. With functions, our program becomes shorter, cleaner, and easier to understand, and much easier to maintain. So in the next slide, we will test everything we have learned in this lecture. Now, with a short quiz before moving on to a final summary, let's move on our next. Great job, everyone. We have now completed all the important topics about functions in Python. So before moving to the final slide, let's quickly test our understanding with a short quiz. Let's try answering each question by yourself before I reveal the answer. Let's begin. So our first question is, what is a function? A function is a reusable block of code that performs a specific task when it is called. Function help us avoid writing the same code again and again. Now the second question, it is very easy. Which keyword is used to create a function? You can see the answer here. The def keyword is used to create a function. Now what is the purpose of the return statement? So the return statement sends a value back from the functions to the place where the function was called. It also ends the execution of function. Now the next question is the difference between parameter and an argument. So parameter is a variable written in the function definition, while argument is the actual value passed when calling the function. Now our next question is that what is recursion? So recursion is a technique where a function calls itself to solve a problem. Every recursive function must have a base case to stop the recursion. Now, what is a lambda function? Our sixth question. A lambda function is a small anonymous function created using the lambda keyword. It is mainly used for short and simple operations. Seventh question is that what is the difference between local and global variable? A local variable is created inside a function and can only be used inside that function, while a global variable is created outside a function and can be accessed throughout the program. Now, our next question is that which function is user defined? So any function created by the programmer using this keyword is called user defined function. I give you example like greet, add, square, z. These all are user defined functions. Now, very good if you have answered most of these questions correctly. Although I told all these in the previous slides, if you missed a few questions, don't worry. Go back, revise the lecture once more, and practice writing a small programs. Remember, programming is a skill that improves with regular practice. Now let's move to our final slide and quickly summarize everything we learned in this lecture. Hope this is clear to you. Now moving on to our next slide. Thank you. Thank you for watching this lecture. Today we learned one of the most important topics in Python, known as functions. We started by understanding what functions are and why they are used. Then we learned how to create functions using the def keyword, how parameters and arguments work, how to use the return statement. So different type of function, variable scope, recursion, lambda function, and finally we solved a real life example together. And then we do a quiz to to see our understanding. I hope this lecture helped you understand the concepts in a simpler and practical way. Now it's your turn to practice. Try writing your own functions, experiment with different examples, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. Every good programmer learns by writing code regularly. And for me, if I made any mistakes while explaining, I know I made some mistakes, or if there was any technical issues, some long pauses, and pronunciation errors during this lecture. I sincerely apologize. Thank you for your patience and understanding. If you found this lecture helpful, please like this video, share it with your friend, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the upcoming Python lecture. Now, in the next lecture, we will continue learning Python with more interesting concepts and hands-on examples. Until then, keep practicing, keep learning, and keep coding. Thank you so much for watching our lecture. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next lecture. And I hope you are watching all our lecture. So, thank you and happy coding.